Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Magic Mics. We get started each week by introducing my two co-hosts. Let's say hello to them, Ruben Bressler.
Hi.
Aaron Campbell. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We begin Magic
I have
Mics.
to address something before we actually get on with the show.
The
The sentence that Evan said before we went on the air was, "We always attach to Amsterdam," and he just wanted me to not talk about that.
Yeah, I didn't want you to not talk.
Whenever we connect to get streaming,
yes,
we have to connect to somewhere, and then you just want me to ignore that happened. That's why we're cracking up.
That's right.
I was actually laughing at his run-on sentence, which I still don't quite know what he's saying. I want to see the subtitle for that someday.
I got a script. I'm running it. And we get started, as we do each week, with the first pick. And the first pick had to be the PAX Spoilers, the PAX Preview Show, the PAX Panels, all the Paxy Packs, the Super Packs. I'm just going to say it. I wasn't the biggest fan of Will Wheaton, but I thought he tried, and I appreciate that.
Well, you have to understand that Will Wheaton wasn't for us. You know,
he's
Will
not
Wheaton.
For us.
I think he was. I think he's a big draw. He does have a huge following, and I think that the emphasis on him was to get new players into, to tap into whatever audience he has. So I understand why he was there. But
oh no, I get it. Don't get me wrong. I understand it, and I feel like maybe next time, maybe things could go a little bit differently, and I would be up for that. However, what they did do at that preview show was give us just like infinite spoilers, and spoilers are good and spoilers are fun. And the first one I wanted to talk about, I mean, first of all, let's get your impressions. Ruben, how did you feel about the preview show? Did you watch it?
I did not. I was reporting on a poker tournament all weekend.
Okay.
But the spoilers that came out of it, I've certainly been up on. So I don't have a ton of I don't have a ton of opinions on the actual preview show. I'm more of a Will Wheaton fan, I guess. I follow him on Twitter. I think he's super entertaining. And Ashley Birch was there also.
Yes.
Right? Who's the voice of the main character in The Last of Us? What I know her from.
I love Will Wheaton. I'm not going. I mean, I followed him for years and years, particularly through the 2000s when he was writing his books and stuff. Like, big Will Wheaton fan. It just didn't. It didn't
mesh
really,
for you?
It didn't work. And I feel like I know he tried. I get it. I see it. I understand it. And I know it's a hard job. So I sympathize greatly. And I'm sure, things will be adjusted for the future and whatever. But, he brought some of his own enthusiasm. And as an enthusiasm enthusiast, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So let's get into some of these spoilers.
I was actually at the preview.
Were you
party.
in the
there.
audience?
I was
in the audience?
there.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Oh my God, it must have been insane.
It was. I have to say it was very refreshing. Speaking of enthusiasm, it was so nice to be around people who were just eating it up, And I have to say, looking at my social media after the fact, I actually couldn't look at it because you go from being in a room full of people that are just so hungry and so stoked and so enthusiastic, and you go on Twitter and it's like, this casting cost is not wrong. This toughness is going to be blah. This is blah.
Right.
And I was just like, you know what? You're killing my buzz right now. I'm going to just let you fit. I'm going to let you do your thing, but I'm going to go back to this here panel. We're all having a fabulous time, and we're all clapping and gasping and oohing and eyeing, and it was amazing to be around it all, and it was a really good time.
I love that Wizards continues the and one more thing, or the last slide is insane, and the show is totally over, guys, and something crazy pops up, which is freaking tastic.
Yeah, I do love that. They're very good at making these, especially at the end of the summer, these which now I guess they're always going to be at PAX.
Right.
These sort of rock star moments where the audience freaks out, especially every 2 years when they announce what the blocks are going to be.
Right.
It alternates between a new world and then a world we're revisiting and a new world and a world we're revisiting. They haven't made that official or anything, but that's the pattern that it's been for a while.
Sure.
So every year when they announce, oh, here's a new world, that one's like, it's kind of exciting. But they announce Return to Ravnica, they announce Battle for Zendikar, people are freaking out. And I love that they just turn it into this huge concert-like event.
Yeah, it's fantastic. You could tell that they definitely worked on it and they had rehearsed it and they, did a good job in terms of getting the structure down, and I appreciate that. So with some of those spoilers, they talked about Rally, and I'm going to bring up on the screen now sort of what allies were back in Zendikar and what they are now in terms of how they work with each other. So you see here, if you're watching the stream, and if you're listening to us, on the left hand side we have Lantern Scout. It's a white and 2 colorless 3/2. that has Rally, which, interestingly enough, is an R in front of Ally. Rally says, shut up.
Oh my God.
Whenever Lantern Scout or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, yes, deal with it, creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn. That's awesome. Now, on the right side of the screen, if you're watching, Kabira Evangel is a white and 2 colorless 2/3, and whenever it or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, you choose a color. If you do, allies you control gain protection from the chosen color until end of turn. Not all of your creatures like the new ones do, just allies back then. So allies were a thing. They were definitely a thing in draft and sealed and all that good stuff, and they were really interesting, and they were pretty powerful, and there was a couple of strategies that tried to make allies work. But now that they've added the R, now that they've added that R,
we're still here.
We're here. Yes, you've grown it down, and now they give their bonuses to everybody. So, Ruben, how do you feel about the allies with the R?
Well, first of all, I hate that Lantern Scout exists because I play red cards, and this is the mortal nemesis of red cards. And you know, the turn that it comes in, it gains you life. That's horrid. I hate that. Why? Stop it, Wizards. All I want to do is play burn spells with my life. But the fact that it gives you all your creatures the ability as opposed to just allies means that it's not just a tribal mechanic. It has a lot wider impact.
Right.
For example, you can always just use it. You know, you can play your 2/2 for 2 that is a cat or a hound, like Isamaru, and then have your, you know, Knight of the White Orchid or whatever on turn 2, and then they'll gain lifelink, as opposed to, you know, with Kabira Evangel, you needed to build your whole deck around it and had a very specific subset of cards that you had to use with your allies. Rally removes a lot of those. You can obviously use them together, but and you know, playing another ally later means that you get the bonus again, which is great, but not necessary. You know, you can use it as a one-shot effect, or you can use it as a 2 or 3 times effect, as opposed to an every turn effect. I think that it's a really good change to making deck building more interesting. It is certainly less linear, which I think that is the big thing that they were trying to change from this, making it so that your deck building decisions for ally decks are not as constrained.
Well, I mean, I think that this is where you see, like, this to me is the correction that they're making now, and not getting stuck into, like, the sliver problem, which is only slivers get the thing, only slivers can be used in your sliver decks, and it's all sliver all the time. Instead, they're like, okay, sweet, we did allies work, people love allies, but we don't want them to be so narrow, so linear, so you have to use this 1 drop and you have to use this 2 drop. Let's give all the bonuses, but we want to reward you for playing ally cards, and that's what it does. Aaron, how do you feel about this card?
The only thing I can think of when I think of this is Collected Company. Like, if all the allies have this sort of ability to them, I'm a little terrified to think about what Collected Company can do, where you cast it and it's like, you know, this guy enters play, let's say another thing enters play, let's say that gives everything Death Touch. Well, now with one Collected Company, you've now got everything with Death Touch, everything with lifelink. I'm just trying to imagine, like, worst case scenarios that these are capable of, and I certainly don't want to face that.
Why are you calling them worst case scenarios? They sound awesome.
It does sound great.
That sounds fantastic.
There has to be. I would be pretty shocked if there weren't a 2-cost 2/2 ally that gave your things first strike.
Yes.
That's like it's white. It would be white 2/1. Give your allies first strike, or give your team first strike when it or another ally enters. So that and Lantern Scout would be a pretty nightmarish Collected Company to run into.
Here we go. And a green and 2 colorless 2/2 that gives a +1/+1 counter to all of your creatures when it enters the battlefield. Yes. Yes. I want a green and a colorless Death Touch ally that has rally of all your guys get Death Touch. Yes. Yes.
Just have them all in green and white.
Yes. And they're going to crush.
That would be quite the deck.
Yes.
But I definitely like the new templating. Rally is pretty cool. It's not a true keyword, because true keywords say, like, when you do something, keyword, like give it trample, like that's a keyword, whereas landfall is sort of like a pseudo keyword, because it's got a whole sentence that explains what landfall does after the word landfall. Rally is that way.
It's the exact same kind as rally. It's the same stuff.
Rally and landfall are very similar. They have the full sentence afterwards.
Sure, they're different kind of keywords. They're keywords.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, they're making new allies. I'm excited to see them. I want Collected Company to crush. Yes. Which is really sweet. I want to do all the awful, because you know when they all hit, right, all of their things trigger at once, and so all of the abilities happen, and So if you collect a company and there's that +1/+1 guy and something else, even though the something else like lifelink, they trigger twice. Yes, so you get 2 triggers of lifelink. Doesn't matter. 2 triggers of that +1/+1 matters.
That's a bigger deal.
That's a huge deal. So, and there very well may not be that creature as a result of that interaction because it's pretty devastating. All right, so we're going to move on to another spoiler, which does work with allies, and this being the Planeswalker of Gideon, ally of Zendikar. I brought it up on the screen, but if you're listening to us, it's 2 white, 2 colorless for a 4 loyalty Planeswalker that has +1 until in turn Gideon, ally of Zendikar, becomes a 5/5 human soldier ally creature with indestructible that's still a Planeswalker. That's a lot of subtypes, by the way. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to him this turn. For 0:, put a 2/2 white knight ally creature token onto the battlefield. And for -4, that's his starting loyalty, you get an emblem with creatures you control get +1/+1. So a few things I want to note about this card. First is the +1 does not give himself haste. So if you play him on turn 4 and you +1 him, it's really just to bump his loyalty so that he can survive next turn, you hope, when you should really be using the 0 ability, which puts a creature in play to block for him and triggers all of your rally creatures that you may have, which kind of really ties Gideon into the allies. For God's sake, allies in the name of the card. So they really kind of tie all that stuff together. -4 is incredibly thematic that Gideon will give his life to boost and glorious anthem all of your team, which is really sweet. I think they really pushed this guy to be strong. And they really wanted Gideon to be a force in standard because, this to me is very aggressive in terms of how they priced it. And I think it's really sweet. But Aaron, how do you feel about Gideon, ally of Zendikar? Tell me. Bring it.
I just don't see it, I guess. It's just not a card that's in my wheelhouse, and I've never really seen it for Gideon. I'll admit I'm not really. I think you should ask Ruben.
Well, I'm going to, but I didn't want to ask Ruben.
Little idiot creatures kind of player. All right, bring it back over.
All right, here we go. Rubes, tell me about how.
The glorious anthem player. I'm ready.
Card is super sweet. Tell us about it.
Rubes.
All right, so a couple things. One is it's kind of unfortunate that Gideon, ally of Zendikar, isn't an ally, so the turn you play it, it doesn't trigger your ally things. It's a lot like Ugin not being a dragon. You can't reveal Ugin to your Foul Tongue Invocation or your Dragon Lord's prerogative or whatever. It's kind of a little bit confusing for new players because a new player will be like, no, it's got the word ally right in the name. And you're like, no, it's not. I'm sorry, new player, but I'm going to make you quit Magic today. And then, right? That's the feeling that you're going to get from this card. But it does make knight allies for some reason. I don't know why it makes knight allies, but break out your Reed Duke tokens. See, there you go, Aaron.
Hey-o.
I made you a Gideon fan all of a sudden. Yes. You got a knight ally Reed Duke on your team. It doesn't have vigilance, unfortunately. So
you have to scratch that off.
A little bit of, whatever.
Yeah. It's fine.
Whatever you have to do to play your Reed Duke tokens, that's what we'll do.
I mean,
and then also, I know it was confusing some people that you made it indestructible and prevented damage.
Sure.
But the reason why they did that is because Planeswalkers die when they have no loyalty. So even if it was just indestructible, if you burned it for all of its counters, it would still die. So it always has to have that wall of text on it. I think that Gideon's super good. Pumping out a 2/2 every turn at no loyal, just being an enchantment that mostly pumps out 2/2s like Xenagos, is exactly the kind of card that I want to be playing in my decks. This guy's very similar to Xenagos. He starts with, he's a 4-cost Planeswalker. He actually has 4 loyalty, so he's actually a little bit tougher to kill than Xenagos, which has been a huge player in Standard for the entire length of time it's been available. So I think this guy's great. Can't wait to see this guy. Usually on my side of the board, less so on Aaron's.
With the amount of with the amount, like any sort of synergy that you have with the allies that have rally in your deck, just any sort of synergy is fantastic and insane at that point. Otherwise, you're just making 2/2s for free every turn, which is amazing. After you make a 2/2, you say go, they do something, you come back, you turn them into a 5/5, you're attacking for 7. That's a pretty sweet deal right there with a 5 loyalty Planeswalker attacking you that can't be dealt damage, that has to be dealt with some other way. That's a pretty powerful card, and they really wanted to kickstart the spoiler season, not only with some insane stuff that we'll talk about here shortly, but with some really powerful and exciting mythic rares to get people going like, holy cow, I want to play with that Planeswalker because this guy he's meant to be a hallmark of Standard and to build either his own archetypes or to be part of a very powerful one, and I think they did a good job there. So we're going to move on a little bit here to talk about Awaken cards. We talked about Awaken a little bit last week, but they have revealed what I feel is going to be a huge pillar in Standard, as we've seen currently with the same effect on Hero's Downfall. I'm going to bring up Ruinous Path. I'm also going to bring up Radiant Flames that we'll talk about here in a second, but right now I want to talk about Ruinous Path. This is 2 black and a colorless for a sorcery that destroys target creature or planeswalker. It has Awaken 4 for 2 black and 5 colorless. So for 7 mana, not only do you destroy a creature or a planeswalker, you may also put 4 +1/+1 counters on a land that you control. It becomes a 0/0 with haste, and it's still a land. So you have the ability to play Hero's Downfall a little bit slower on your turn, but for another 4 mana, you have suddenly a 4/4 out of it. That's incredibly powerful stuff. And I think not only is this effect one of the format defining type effects that you have in a Standard environment, which I think Wizards quickly latched onto, which is great. They also said, well, let's make it a little bit better. Let's give it this kind of kicker type mechanic so that late in the game, not only are you getting their guy, you are sort of 2 for 1 in that you're getting a creature and a removal spell all in one card. So Aaron, now this is a black card that's doing a lot of cool stuff, so yes. I think this one is in your wheelhouse.
Costs 1 million mana.
Costs a bunch. Here we are.
We're looking for.
Scales. I was actually, again, I was there when they spoiled this, and I was very happy to see this, because I think Hero's Downfall was a very important card for Black, because Black had a very difficult time dealing with Planeswalkers until Hero's Downfall came along, if you weren't able to discard it. So I'm glad that they're bringing that kind of effect back. I think Awaken is going to be good in like control type shells, where because a lot of times when you're facing a control deck, you board out your removal because you assume that they're not going to have any creatures. But having abilities with the possibility of awakening and the possibility of having creatures, I think can be a nice 1-2 punch and possibly a nice surprise against your opponents if you're playing a control deck. And maybe Blue-Black will finally take off. Maybe control in general will just take off again, and maybe Black will be a part of it, and I'll be really happy to see that. So I'm very thrilled with it.
I mean, Blue-Black is still seeing play right now. I mean, as I can't remember either. I think it was Reed Duke who played Blue-Black Control in the at the Invitational.
Yeah, the one that he won.
But I don't think it's been like think it's been as established though as it's been in other blocks. Certainly, though, is what I'm saying. Like,
sure, absolutely. It needs some tools. This is definitely one of them, and a card that you want in those decks. Ruben, how do you feel about it?
One of the tensions for decks that are Blue-Black X Control is always, how do you end up winning the game? Once you establish that you have control of the game, how do you then transform that into actually putting a win in the win column? And usually you have to put cards in your deck, like Aetherlink, that aren't things you want to be drawing on turn 3. Whereas Ruinous Path, you do want to be drawing on turn 3, right. And also on turn 17. Yeah. So you get to have the early effect, you get to have the late game effect, and also have a way to actually close out a game. This being a 4/4 is actually a huge deal. If they had printed this one making a 3/3, 2/2, it wouldn't close out the game nearly as quickly. There's a big difference between Celestial Colonnade and Creeping Tar Pit, for example. Creeping Tar Pit was a way to win games in Blue-Black that was, they didn't really want to use it because it was a little slow. Celestial Colonnade being a 4/4, you can pump mana into it and close out a game much quicker with 4 power than you can with 3.
Well, you can, but it's unblockable. Like, Creeping Tar Pit is
no,
legit.
It's still quite good.
That card's seen Legacy play and still does.
I'm not saying that. Well, Legacy's a different animal entirely. Where establishing control in Legacy is a lot different than establishing control.
All of the manlands, except for the green-white one, were pretty ridiculous.
Sure, I mean they're all ridiculous, but my point being that you can close out a game in 4 or 5 turns with a 4/4, whereas a 3-power creature by itself will take you 7. Maybe 8 turns to punch through.
Well, it's really interesting, Aaron, that you talked about how Black had a very hard time with Planeswalkers. Now, back in the day, they kept trying to give Black like a really clever way of dealing with Planeswalkers. Not just something that says kill a Planeswalker. In the original Zendikar set, there was an uncommon which was called Vampire Hexmage. It's 2 black for a 2/1 first strike. I know, I'm just for the viewers, for the listeners. It's 2 black for a 2/1 first strike, and it sacked itself to remove all counters from target permanent. Now, that has a problem with a little land called Dark Depths, and that created a whole issue, and it kind of ruined Extended, and Jerry Thompson completely extorted that as his
mind.
He crushed that season. It was unbelievable. And so that interaction's kind of bad.
Eldrazi's.
But you had a black way of dealing with planeswalkers that was in a pretty good card. A 2-black first strike vampire, which was, there were vampire type tribal stuff at the time. Very, solid card, but just not what you could put into a control deck. Not what you could put into both an aggro deck and a control deck, which is a card like Ruinous Path, which I think is, again, it's good early, it's good late. And that's about the best you could hope for in a control deck that's looking for a card that does this type of effect, which I think is very powerful and really interesting. I think sort of contrast between where Zendikar was and where we are today with Battle for Zendikar in terms of card design, removal, what you have access to, and what it's available to do. Sort of.
I like that this is a card that you have access to. It's just going to be a thing in Standard now, where Black is going to have this 3-mana spell that can kill Planeswalkers. Right. This one's a sorcery. That's the biggest deal on this card. You can't do it at end of turn. You can't leave up Hero's Downfall, dissolve, and get away scot-free every time. Right. I think that's the biggest deal. Making a creature's nice. Getting to 7 mana, if you're a control deck, getting to 7 mana, you're going to win the game somehow. This just happens to be the way to do it.
Sure.
But I think that the big deal here is how you're going to have to start building more tap-out style control decks as opposed to traditional style.
Sure. So let's move on to Radiant Flames. Radiant Flames is on screen right now. It's a red and 2-colorless sorcery with Converge, the new mechanic Converge. It's like Sunburst, but not really. Which that Converge basically counts the number of colors of mana, or the types, the number of colors of mana that you spend to cast it. So Radiant Flames, red and 2-colorless sorcery, it deals X damage to each creature, where X is the number of colors of mana spent to cast it. And this is an incredibly powerful card. And I know, Ruben, you were talking about it right before the broadcast. Tell me about Radiant Flames and how you feel it's going to impact Standard.
Yeah, talk about another card for control decks. This card is, Fire Spout was a huge player, and you had to cast it for green mana to kill flyers when you were playing against fairies, and you had to cast it for red to kill Kithkins and other idiots that were in the format at the time. All of these 3 mana, 3 damage sweepers typically see play. Flame Break is another good example. Even 3 mana guys that deal 2 damage, like Volcanic Fallout, oftentimes will see play. We've recently seen Seismic Rupture in a lot of sideboards, for example. Radiant Flames is fabulously good. It's going to put a lot of strain on your deck building because in order to get your 3rd mana on turn 3 reliably, you're going to have to do some weird things with your mana bases, as you've seen from the Abzan decks. So I think that the power level of this card will make red. This is the reason to play red in a control deck. This card. And another reason why having a 4/4 would be a good idea, because if this is the premier sweeper, then you're for sure going to want to have your lands survive Radiant Flames. So I'm real excited about that card. That card that's an exciting one for me.
Yeah,
that's
really
a red card that Aaron can get behind too.
Aaron?
Yeah, my first thought when I saw this was I was thinking of Modern Jund and how restrictive the mana base is, but yet you're still able to come up with 3 colors if you need to, or 2 colors if you need to. It's a lot easier to cast in something like Anger of the Gods or Volcanic Fallout, which requires 2 red, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're playing with a 3-color mana base with fetches and shocklands, it's really not fun to have to do.
Sure.
I would even possibly use this in Living End. There were times where we were boarding in Anger of the Gods against things like Merfolk, to get rid of little dinky things that you could, bring back your bigger things, and possibly even in Grixis. Blue, black, red is really cool now. Grixis Delver, they like to delve out a Gurmag Angler, so you Radiant Flames for 2, 3, wipe everything they have, and they've got a Tassiger and a Gurmag, and it doesn't phase them. So I think this is pretty versatile. Like, I'd like to see this pop up in other formats too.
Yeah, this card's great.
Yeah, this card's sweet. So, going to bring it back here for a second, and I wanted to talk a little bit now about the big surprise that they kind of unveiled at the end of the show. I was supposed to have a slide set up, but I don't, so we're going to keep moving.
Rockstar Encore.
The Rockstar Encore. This was the drop the mic moment. They always have them at this point in terms of the late fall set reveal stuff, which is great and amazing, and I love it. And whether it's the early or the late, like when they announced Return to Ravnica, they did the same way. They're like, our show's over. Return to Ravnica comes up, coming fall, whenever it was coming out, and oh my god, everyone loses their minds. And it's great because those are like the moments that you wait for as a Magic player. Aaron, I think it was amazing that you could be there for it, because what they revealed at the time were expedition lands. Now, I want to bring some up on the screen, in particular Arid Mesa and Steam Vents. So this was one of the kind of the big images that was floating around the web as soon as they announced it. And expedition lands are lands that are legal in the sets in which they are current, or in the formats in which they are currently legal. They do not move into standard as a result of being printed this way. They are special promos that you get a little bit more often than a foil mythic rare. A foil mythic rare shows up once every case. Once every 6 booster boxes. Now, this is 6 booster boxes that are packaged together as a case, not just 6 booster boxes that I pulled off random shelves or bought online 6 different ways. So, with them being 25 of them, and they're a little bit more common than the 15 mythic rares, there's a little bit more commonality than the 1 per case that a mythic rare foil currently is in. However, these are extended art, these are new art, and these are only printed in foil at the mythic rarity, and oh my god, what happened?
Yeah.
I do believe that these are legal in the sealed environment. Like, if you open them in a limited pool, you can play them in limited.
Yes, and my apologies. You're correct on that, Aaron. They're legal in limited, and for constructed, they're only legal in which the land,
Are
which the
currently
name,
legal.
yeah, and so again, this is a way to get around. We don't want to put Steam Vents back in standard. We don't want to put Arid Mesa and all that stuff back in standard.
But we do want to print more copies. Yeah.
Well, I would actually argue that they want to print. They want to print new rares that are incredibly valuable, incredibly exciting, and are going to sell an incredible number of packs. Because as much as cards are worth in the secondary market, Wizards doesn't see any of that. Only the resellers and the retailers do. Whereas Wizards wants you to buy packs because buying packs is how they make their revenue. And these cards, my God, will sell packs. I've seen pre-order amounts of hundreds of dollars. I've heard amounts of something like $300 to $350 for the blue fetch lands versions of these. $250 for the blue shock lands of these, like Steam Vents, for example, or Watery Grave. These things are absolutely incredibly rare. It will cost you thousands of dollars to get a playset of all these things easily. And this is it's a very clever technique that they are taking, I feel, from Yu-Gi-Oh!, where Yu-Gi-Oh! Has lands or cards that are very similar to this. They have like ultra, super, secret, mega rare. Oh my god, you won't believe how rare this thing is. It's crazy, crazy rare. And as a result, it's worth crazy, crazy money. Now, where there is a distinct difference where how Konami deals with Yu-Gi-Oh! And how Wizards deals with Magic is that Magic, while not saying it directly, does respect the secondary market and does respect the value of your collection. Whereas Konami is like, here is this super crazy mythic card that is just like the best thing ever, and it costs $100 to $200 or whatever it is, crazy price it is at the time. And then next year they'll release, it in a box set where you get a play set. And they're like, yeah, whatever, you pay $30 for this box set and you can just get a playset of whatever was the most ridiculously expensive rare for a year, completely demolishing people's value in terms of the cards that they had. Whereas Wizards are very careful to not introduce a ton of old existing cards, so which ironically, and based on the way that Wizards releases cards, actually normally increases the value of the originals, because now people want to play with the originals and they have the new stuff. So while Thoughtseize, yes, got up to like, what was it, like $80 or $100 or whatever was ridiculous for the Lorwyn version, yes, it went down a little bit, but it still regained a ton of value. The new one's still worth a whole bunch of money, and now they're both worth plenty of money together by themselves, so there's not that much damage dealt. So for me, I think it's a very suave business decision in terms of we're putting these lands and we're making these things because A, it's the land set, we can do that. B, we're creating a new rarity with a new different card type that is very exciting. And C, we're creating something that is very expensive that you can really treasure. I mean, when you open these things, oh my God, you're going to have the biggest like flip out, I feel great, I just won the lottery moments. And that's a great moment.
The whole comic book shop's going to come over and be like, oh my God.
Oh yeah.
I can't believe how lucky you are.
Now,
that is the coolest thing ever. Get him a iron case to put that in before someone steals it.
That's right. So I am a little cautious in that this slope can be very slippery. And the comic book industry kind of went through this, where they had variant covers, they had limited edition covers, they had covers that were embossed and foiled and done all of this super special stuff too, and they only made very small amounts of them in order to boost their sales, in order to boost their numbers, in order to create collectibles of this nature. Yu-Gi-Oh! Now has God knows how many levels of rarity. I can't even keep up with it anymore, but they have a ton of like super duper uber special rarities of uber special, crazy foiling type of card stuff. Because for me, this is absolutely not the last time you're going to see this. You're going to see more of the expedition type of foil rarities. Let's imagine that we go back to Innistrad, because we're going back to Innistrad. Let's face it. It's only a matter of when. When we go back to Innistrad, I will expect to see a expedition-like foil-only mythic rare extended art version of Liliana of the Veil. I expect it. And whatever other rares that they bring back, like, for example, Avacyn Angel of Hope, or whatever it is, they can make foil extended versions, art versions of Gristlebrand, for example, with all new art, and they can bring back these cards into these packs that are unbelievably expensive, that create super cool versions for people to covet and people to collect, and for people to kind of show off and, you know, kind of be like, look, this is my version of Liliana of the Veil I have in my cube, and it's super sick. So, again, Wizards is in the business of improving their profits and their sales. This is something that certainly does that. It's just, I want them to be very careful to not kind of overdo it, so we don't have these guys and then something else, and then something like, you know, well, you have these guys, then you have like the black foil or whatever that are even more rare than this foil.
San Diego Comic-Con, yeah.
Exactly. So it's something I think is incredibly exciting, and I love it. And Ruben, tell me how you feel about this take.
I am 98% in favor of this. My one worry is that this will lead to more people dropping from sealed events. When they open their packs and they've got, you know, a Godless Shrine that's shiny and full art, and that's, you know, $200 or whatever.
They're not going to pass it.
No, obviously you're never passing that, and and statistically there are enough. This is going to be fun to see what happens with this, because I bet that this story is going to happen, which is statistically in a Grand Prix of 1,500 people, a couple of those are going to get opened, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Let's say 10 per Grand Prix.
Sure.
Of the foil. Let's estimate. Just
I can tell you, SCG is running GP Atlanta in November. Yeah. It's Battle for Zendikar sealed.
Yeah.
And you're going to see a lot of these getting opened, and you're going to get to see kind of what happens. And you know there's going to be that foil Tarmogoyf moment, right?
Yeah.
Top 8 of the draft, someone opens a extended art Watery Grave.
That's exactly where I'm going. Which is, let's say, like, Sean McLaren is opening his sealed pool. Maybe Sean McLaren's not the best example of this, but like some you know, like Pascal Maynard is opening his sealed pool.
Nice.
Actual test case from GP Vegas.
Sure.
And he opens a foil Stomping Ground full art, right? Mm-hmm. Now, it's not exactly Tarmogoyf. Obviously, the foil Tarmogoyf is like 4X, and you know, maybe it needs to be some other, like Silver Pro or something, you know, some middle level where his performance in the tournament has some value, but it's about equal to the value of this card that he can just cash in on. So do you pass it or do you keep it? It's super interesting, and I think that that's going to happen a lot, where a mid-level pro is going to open one of these expedition lands. That's the one worry I have. Other than that very small corner case scenario of somebody who needs to win events accidentally opens one of these at one of those events, I think that these are great. They add a super exciting pack opening moment. You know, the 12-year-old who just started playing Magic happens to open one of these, and you've just created a new fan for life.
Sure.
You get these really cool, like the corner comic book shop gets to have the one or two of them that they opened in their case until the high roller walks in and buys them all. You know, you get to have your super big vintage collectors get their super pimped out versions of lands for their decks, and they get to show up on coverage every once in a while. I think it's a great PR move, and I'm super excited to see them. I would be afraid to hold one, I think.
Aaron, how do you feel about?
Expensive.
Yeah, how do you feel about these crazy lands?
I think I'm more excited about our next card. I mean, I'm not finance girl. Like, I'm not. I don't know much about like that whole life. Like, they're pretty. I would certainly love a playset of the ones that I would probably play the most. But like, I'm just not as excited about them as I am the next card. So.
Well, lands are great.
Sure.
You're just jaded.
Well,
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. Like, I'm happy that people are excited about it. Believe me, I was around the excitement. I love it. But for me personally, it's just not something I get psyched up about. So
That's
now
fair.
that you are, like, I'm loving your reactions. Like,
sure.
Anytime you can build excitement around lands, lands are the least exciting part of Magic. Anytime you can build excitement around lands, take it.
Sure. So first, I want to bring up a copy I'm getting this set up right now. Give me just 2 seconds here. First, I wanted to bring up a copy of the new dual lands. Now, we're going to talk about what we should call them, but let's just call them right now the new dual lands. And if you take a look at Canopy Vista, this is just one of the 5. There's 5 for each, or there's 1 for each friendly pair. This is one, like they're the expedition lands, the foil extended art, mythic only rarity foils have 5 of these new dual lands from Battle for Zendikar, plus all 10 fetches, all 10 shocks. Yep. And so you'll be able to get the new Battle for Zendikar duels in this manner, but also as regular rares in the set, which will be a thing. And we'll talk more about what we call these and how good they are and so on and so forth later. What card were you wanting to talk about, Aaron, exactly?
Ulamog.
All right. Hold on. I'm pulling him up here so everybody can talk about it.
That card got probably one of the loudest. I mean, people were definitely excited about the lands, but this card got so much and you have to understand, he was also the statue. Did you see the statue?
Yes.
Oh, sure.
He was the statue. So, I would argue that much of the weekend revolved around Ulamog.
He was the title song of the album for sure.
Pretty much, and I'm just, I just keep hearing the reactions in my head when he was spoiled, and the ooh from the crowd, and just the holy crap of it all.
Sure.
And
new Ulamog or New Lamog, obviously, as he could be referenced, is super interesting. And there's a couple things I wanted to talk about with New Ulamog, actually. One is that he's another one of these remove stuff from the game guys, another one of these exile lords, which, first of all, when you cast him, you exile 2 permanents, which is unbelievably good. That's ridiculous how powerful that is. He's still indestructible, and they can be lands. Exactly, right. You can take out awakened lands or non-awakened lands.
Right.
He's indestructible, which is apparently the Ulamog's thing. Like Gideon fights for his team. Ulamog's indestructible. That's just what he is. And also, when he attacks, the defending player exiles the top 20 cards of their library. That's a lot of cards. I don't have many cards in my library. The most important thing about Ulamog that I wanted to talk about is something that's not on the card.
Don't shuffle it back in.
When it's put into your graveyard, you leave it there.
Right.
So all of these are going to be reanimation targets.
Yes.
I fear for the future of Modern and Legacy, where Reanimate and Goryo's Vengeance suddenly have these new tools that just stay in your graveyard forever.
Yeah.
Right.
So I have it on screen now, and just to kind of run through the card, it's Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger. 10 mana 10/10, legendary creature Eldrazi. When you cast it, you exile 2 permanents, it's indestructible, and as Ruben noted, whenever he attacks, defending player exiles the top 20 cards of his or her library. The flavor text being a force as voracious as time itself. Yeah.
Wow.
I also have a picture of the statue that Aaron had talked about. On screen, the Eldrazi is bursting forth up from the street. It has an arm out. It's crushing the police car. And
the 2 target permanents that it decided to exile were a police car and a lamppost for some reason. Those were really difficult to win against.
And the lamppost still works, which is fantastic.
Well, the cop car had smoke coming from it too, and the lights.
It also had blinking lights.
Right. Yeah, which is fantastic. So this card is a very exciting mythic rare, and again, one of those cards that they wanted to really kick off the spoiler season with some big ones. So yeah, it's like the idea that like milling is becoming this pseudo serious strategy is something I think Wizards is kind of playing with a little bit here, because so much stuff is exiling, even whether it's on attack triggers because of ingest, or whether it's cards like this that trigger just themselves to exile cards, and then you do things with those exile cards, which is really neat too. So Aaron, how do you feel about sort of milling being an actual viable thing, sorta, in current design?
Well, I think with regards to the Eldrazi, I think it's a very big win for flavor. I sat on a couple of the panels that were going on about the new Eldrazi set, and one of the things that they kept stressing was this white desiccation almost that happens from Ulamog and his lineage. And you'll see, I don't know how much of the art you've seen, but you're starting to see like this white and they described it to
Yeah.
someone described it almost like the same material that your teeth are made out of, like just the stringy, these fibers and this desiccation that happens. It's really just sort of dissolving the land, and you're seeing like these patches of just white. And I think it's just a new way. It's not really destroying the planet. It's just sort of, for lack of a better word, it's doing something similar to an exile effect. It's making the world obsolete. It's just, it's fragile. You can't walk on it. You can't. It's just eating it. And I think that it ties nicely into this exile effect. And so I think it's very cool. And reanimation. Like, I'm very sad that this won't be around at the same time as Whip of Erebos, because I would love to whip this into play and just be like, whoop.
Probably
just,
on.
Oh
purpose.
my God! Yes, please.
that would be my ideal scenario. But I think reanimation is fun. 1010 is fun. Indestructible is fun. And just I think the colors are nice. I think it's better that if you're looking at this on Mythic Spoiler, you can see what the previous art was like. And the previous art wasn't bad per se, but like you just see the colors. And there's one really haunting picture. I don't know. I don't think it's on a card yet, but if you can find it, there's a picture of Ulamog, and he's sitting by water.
Oh, that picture's so sick. I gotta find it now.
It's almost like this Buddhist kind of, like, he's very zen, and like he's got one of his hands just fetching water, and you can see all the white, destroyed land around him, and he's just chilling by the water, and it's just beautiful in this really macabre kind of way, and it's cool.
Yeah, it's super sweet, and unfortunately I can't find it as I do a quick search here, but yeah, dig up and I'm sure it's a really sweet card, whatever card the art ends up being on. I'm sure we'll talk about it at some point, but there's some really cool ways that they're dealing with exiled cards. So there's the Scions, in which you're getting 1/1s instead of 0/1s that sacrifice for colorless mana. Do not sacrifice them unless you absolutely have to, because 1/1s are far better than 0/1s. Back when you had the Eldrazi spawn, the Scions are much better, and that's a good thing. But yeah, Ulamog is super sweet, and it was great. But it all kind of happened at PAX. PAX, one of the biggest conventions that you can kind of imagine in the gaming world these days, which I think is really sweet. The rise of Penny Arcade in and of itself is a fantastic story, and watch them kind of take over the industry. Aaron, how did you feel attending it? How was the con? How was teaching people how to play? Like, how was your experience entire?
It was insane. I got there, so I got there Thursday, and then the first day of PAX was Friday, and I spent most of my time in the Learn to Play area, and I was working with Wizards of the Coast and Lady Planeswalker Society, and it was our job to teach people Magic. So all of this hype that was going on, the Ulamog statue, the game with Felicia Day and Chris Cluey, all of that was sort of meant to get people interested in the game. And and the first couple days that I was teaching, I felt like people had some idea what Magic was. By Monday, though, we were getting all the people who saw the craziness and were like, I want to be a part of that. Like, is this game going to get me to understand this? And so I was having to teach a lot more each day, which I didn't mind, but it was something I definitely noticed. And I think the best part of the teaching experience was just getting to hear people's stories. I think we forget that there are people behind these decks, and getting to hear what they've played before. I had one girl who came up to me whose mom got her into Magic, and for her to be second generation Magic player and for her mom to be first generation Magic was awesome. And for me personally, it was really great having people with the same color as me, or my favorite color. I remember there was a little girl who came to my table, and I taught her using a green deck, and they were able to keep that deck afterwards. And she looked at me and she was like, "Can I have a black deck?" And I was like, we're not supposed to give away more than one, but if you promise to go home and be the best black mage ever, you can have a black deck. And she was like, thanks, lady. And she walked away, and I was like,
"Aww."
That's her origin story. We're gonna see her win worlds in 5 years.
That's right.
But yeah, so the best part was getting to hear people's stories, and Wizards just treated us so well. We got these massive grab bags that had like Commander Arsenal in it. I came home with like 20 packs of Magic, all the Magic pins they've ever given away. They treated us so well. We were fed every day. We had nice catered lunches. It was just a spectacular experience, and just to be part of it, and just have people look at you and just sort of, you're with that game with the statue out there. It was like, yeah, I really am, and that was a proud moment.
That's fantastic. I'm glad you had a good time. Teaching people how to play is how we keep playing, as it were. Keep doing what we're doing here.
There was a time where I used to teach a lot of people, and teaching Magic is not easy to do.
It is not.
I think the other thing that really kind of made me feel a sense of pride was hearing people say things like, "We didn't know Magic could do this," because they really went all out for this, and I think this was the most they had done at a PAX before. So seeing people walk in and say, "Is this Magic?" Like just that, like what, like, you know, again, people know what the game is, but to think that we were capable of this just blew people's minds. I didn't think they think we had it in us.
Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, for me, I just cannot teach people how to play Magic. I can't. I know it's weird. I did make a video where I started making like how to play Magic in a video, but then Wizards kind of came out with all their how to play stuff, so I was like, I don't want to kind of reinvent the wheel. But yeah, in real life, I can't teach it at all. I'm so obsessed with like the right play and playing instance at the end of your turn and like all this other stuff, and I'm just like, you're not playing optimally. Don't you understand? You know, you want to be on curve.
I'm much better at that kind of stuff. Whenever I teach games, I try as hard as I can to not teach people how to play optimally and let them figure that out for themselves. Yeah. Right. But I just give them, these are lands. They tap for mana. These are the 4 types of spells. I try as hard as I can to not be like, instance, you can cast them at any point, but you should cast them during your opponent's combat step. Like, I try not to do that. It's tough, obviously, because I've been playing for so long. We've been playing for so long that we know that typically you want to play stuff in your second main phase, and but
seeing the light in somebody's eyes, though, when they do get it, though, is just priceless. Like, you know, to see somebody go from that confused, like, I'm going to play a creature, and then all of a sudden you see they put 2 and 2 together that you can use active treason and fiery conclusion, and then it's literally magic. Like, I hate to make be cliche. It's perfect.
All right, so we're running out of time, so we're going to keep moving here. We're going into Going Infinite. We're going Infinite, which is kind of not really a thought experiment at this point. It's kind of like what we want to name a thing and talk about a thing now. When I saw the announcement of the new duels, which I'm bringing up on screen, I have Canopy Vista and Prairie Stream, which, are we kind of running out of dual land names?
Oh, yeah. 100%.
That's the Prairie Stream. Okay, whatever.
Stream going through a prairie.
Exactly. This is one of those, like, they're going to name it something generic, but they're never going to reprint them until another Zendikar block, just like they did with the Ravnica Shocklands, you know. It's Temple Garden. You could put it anywhere. Yeah, right. It's only in Ravnica. Anyway, Canopy Vista, Prairie Stream, they are dual lands that have basic land types. That's a big deal. And they also enter the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more basic lands. Another huge deal. It almost completely keeps them in standard, which I think is really sweet. Secondly, it keeps them out of vintage because they're not abusable in that manner. They're also not abusable in legacy for the same reason. However, the question is, we have fetch lands, we have shock lands, we have filter lands. What are these lands? Now, Reddit had a thread about this, and I'm not claiming that it's mine, but as soon as I saw Tango lands, I was in. I was 100% Team Tango. Tango's happening because it takes 2. It takes 2 to tango. It takes 2 to make things happen. It's exciting. It's awesome. I'm really excited about it, and I want it to be Tango. And then my buddy Daniel, who is on the SCG Live coverage staff, came up with the best joke ever, which is when you open one of these and you open an Expedition land, you just opened Tango and Cash.
Wow.
Yeah!
Wow. I wasn't sold on Tango until that joke.
Dude.
Honestly. Until the Tango and Cash joke.
It was perfect.
I was not on board, but
it was good.
But now that you have Tango and Cash,
it was good.
I'm more sold on it now.
Am I wrong? It was great.
I'm not. I'm going to temper your excitement a little. I'm sorry. Don't give me the grumpy cat. I'm trying to talk this out because I don't think that anyone who's not from, like, the eastern time zone of the United States understands the Tango line. I don't think that it's a thing that, you know, it's very North America. I don't think that it takes 2 to tango is a thing that most people know about.
It is a cultural thing, which is largely to North American culture type, you know, the Western culture, whatever you want to call it. However, so as soon as I tweeted about it and I was like, oh my God, I love Tango lands. We need to call these Tango lands. You know, the WotC guys, Trick Jarrett and Kelly Diggs, they were just like, hey, that's not necessarily understood internationally. We should call these count lands. And I'm like, that's the most boring crap.
Count lands is stupid.
It's awful.
Unless
I don't
you're
want to
like,
call them count lands.
Unless every time you play it, you go 1, 2, which you're not doing. No. So I would prefer dub lands. For double, except for dub is one syllable, and also dub lands is a pun for Dublin. But dub lands I think works because you need dubs. You're rolling on dubs.
Wow. Rolling on dubs. How
and you know if we're but Tango lands is super catchy, so I could see it catching on. But count land, I just don't see count lands happening.
I just think count lands is so boring. Aaron, how do you feel about this one?
I'm on Team Tango lands.
Yes. Team Tango and Cash. Tango and Cash.
Now that I'm thinking about Tango lands, I want Mishra's Photoshop to like Photoshop your head on like a tangoing partner duo, and have like the lady with the bow down and the man with the rose in his mouth, and like I can see it now. So if Mishra's Photoshop is watching this, you need to turn Evan Irwin in like a Dancing with the Stars couple doing the tango. And
I wish we could call these basic lands. Because they depend on basics, but you can't call them basic lands because that's already a thing.
That's awful.
You could call them, like... Gosh, there's just no way to really win with this. You can call them Zen lands, because they're Zendikar, maybe?
No, not really. So
even of a tango, come on.
Yeah,
I love Tango lands personally, but I'm from North America where I get that reference.
Where you totally understand it. I understand that as well. So we are going to keep moving as we must on to Gather the Townsfolk. What was people talking about this week? The World Championship happened. Seth Manfield won it. Aaron, tell me about Seth Manfield winning with Obzon, the green-black cards with the white cards.
Oh, man. So I was actually watching this live as it was happening. I took a break from teaching, and it was Seth versus Owen, and it was such a tense game. It came down to, Owen had an Ugin, which he could have used to really reset the board and really reestablish himself. And, Seth was able to find a hero's downfall, which was able to get rid of that plan. And, Seth won with, I think, a couple vampires from Soren and, an alpha swing with, and he had like 3 Siege Rhino in his hand and 1 on the board. And it was just these insane plays, and it was so much fun to watch. And whoever was running the camera did a really good job of enabling that tension. So like you're seeing Seth, and Seth has his head in his hands, and he's just like, I don't know what to do. And then they cut to Owen, and Owen's like rubbing his temples, and then Seth responds by like cracking his neck, and then Owen responds by like looking around, and like they just really did it. Like I'd be surprised if somebody didn't do like a super cut of this, because it was just so much fun to watch. And Seth, I think he got up, like he was so emotional, he got up, stood up out of his chair, pushed the chair back a little bit, and I think he might have maybe cried or like maybe got really emotional. Wow. And you were just so happy for him. Like you couldn't fault him. He made sure to give Owen a great handshake. I think he gave him 2 handshakes, and there was nobody there that wasn't happy for him. Like it was just a beautiful moment.
Sure. Seth is an impressive human. He's got there's some players that just happen to close more often than others. Alex Hayne is a good example. He's won half of the premier level events he's played in. Seth Manfield's another one. He's got 3 Grand Prix wins, and now he's a world champion.
Sure.
And I don't think that it's by accident. I think that it's something that I don't know if it can be taught. I don't know if it's inherent, but he has it. I'm also super happy for him because leading into the event, I think that one of the big things that people looked at Seth and were like, I don't know if he can win Worlds, is he's a brand new father. He's got a newborn at home. I don't know how much. Yeah, I don't know how much time he has. I don't know how much. This was the same thing with Mike Sigrist, who just had two twins. Yeah. They both just had kids, and everyone knows that both of those players are insanely talented. And they're like, yeah, all things being equal, I think they have a good chance to win. But they're getting 3 hours of sleep a night. And, they have to mix up baby formula instead of testing standards. So I don't know if they have a chance to win this. And to see Seth just crush this tournament, X and 1, and like into the top 4, and then win the top 4 and become world champion, that is a huge achievement, not just for a Magic player, but for someone who's got that much on their plate already. I'm super happy for Seth. He's as I mentioned in the pre-show, Seth is a peach. He's a lovely human, and I'm super happy for him, and I couldn't be prouder to have someone like Seth Manfield be my world champion.
Yay. Hashtag MTG dads.
Yes. Yay. Dad's taken over for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, as they should. All right, so we got to keep moving. We'll have one more quick discussion here on splash damage. Splash damage is when we talk about things that aren't related directly to Magic or coming from Wizards, but are related to Magic, but not coming from Wizards still. And we talked last week about Puzzle Quest, Magic Puzzle Quest. Aaron, you got some time at PAX, at the show, to play this thing. Tell us about it. What in the world are we in for?
Oh, girl. Okay, so...
That's a great reaction.
Wow.
Okay, so I'm going to preface this by saying that ultimately I would play this. Like, this is something I would absolutely put on my phone, put on my iPad, what have you. We were right. It is basically Bejeweled. But the way that it works is you can play with multiple people, and you are planeswalkers. So, like, let's say I was Chandra. Let's say Ruben was Garrick. This is what we're going to do. You each get a turn, and the mana symbols...
Right?
We'll just go along with that. So because of the mana symbols, whatever mana symbols you match, that mana goes in your pool. But each planeswalker also has a penalty. So for example, if you put white mana into Chandra's pool, that mana comes at a -1 penalty, meaning you don't get all of it. You also get a penalty if it's blue with Chandra. Obviously, if you give her red mana, that's a good thing. If you give her black and green, it's neutral. She gets whatever mana you earn from that row matching. You can then spend that mana on cards in your hand, like creatures, abilities, things like that. You also have an ability of that planeswalker. So Chandra's ability was just like a direct bolt to the opponent or to the planeswalker, like she does. There's also planeswalker symbols, which if you match those, that energy goes directly to her planeswalker abilities. Any mana that you earn, part of that goes to her planeswalker ability, but if you get a whole row, that all goes to her planeswalker ability. And then there's creatures. The creatures automatically attack each turn. The damage also doesn't regenerate each turn. So if you cast something like Chandra's Fury, she does 1 damage to all of Ruben's creatures, and that 1 damage stays. It doesn't regenerate.
More like Hearthstone.
Correct.
Yeah.
So there's elements from all sorts of different games there. There's Bejeweled, there's Hearthstone, there's obviously Magic, which we know and love. And I thought it was fun. It wasn't too complicated. It had a lot of existing mechanics that we know. You can play it with your friends, and I'd pick it up. Like, I thought it was fun.
That's great. I mean, It's nice that they're expanding, as we mentioned, they're expanding the Wizards IP. They're letting Wizards characters, Magic the Gathering characters, do different things. They still should have included a promo in the board game. Wizards, come on, man. But it's okay. Which is, if there is a code to get me something in the Magic Duels game, if I play this game, that's a thing they could do. I don't know if they want to get near Magic Online, because Magic Online, but if they do, that's cool too. But I'm not really expecting it, because if they're in like the iOS Android space, they have Magic Duels, they'll want to link these things if they can, and that's fine. But again, this is a way of using Magic characters more than you sort of expect. So we're gonna round it out here. We're gonna go around the final corner towards the finisher, as we do each and every week. We take a topic and we have a fun little spin on it. So this week for the finisher, at PAX Prime this past weekend, Limited Resources, one of the most beloved Magic podcasts of all time, recorded its 300th episode in front of a live audience. Yay! Well, congratulations, guys. You did great. So in honor of their monumental achievement, I want to know, what would the 300th episode of Magic Mics look like? So, Ruben, you wanna kick us off here?
Sure. Well, years. Is that the one I'm reading?
Yes. You're on the years after.
Yeah. Sorry. Little peek behind the curtain there. Years after Aaron has left the show to be the host of America's Next Top Model, season 347, and Ruben went crazy trying to solve Hearthstone. Evan, or the reanimated corpse of Evan, and co-hosts holographic Anthony Lowry and robot Nick Miller discuss the spoilers for the fall expansion of Battle for Return to Ravnikar, Fury Road, 2, Electric Boogaloo, The Search for More Cash.
Yes, the search for more foily, mythic,
for more
super rare, for more Tango and Cash. That's what they're there for.
That.
Yes. Now, for me,
it's a long hashtag.
The 300th, it's very long. The 300th episode of Magic Mics would include the panelists of Magic Mics getting together for the 300th episode to discuss the national team from Mars. Should be split into 2 teams for the World's Magic Cup, and that is worlds. That is plural. There are multiple worlds now. It is it might be the Universe Cup. Just
the solar system.
Of the solar system cup, because we're gonna keep going after this.
We didn't invite the world's team from Jupiter.
No, I don't like those guys. They're a bunch of cheaters.
I'm Team Ur.
Jupiters. God, those sick Jupiters. God, they're awful. I hate them. Oh, so bad.
I'm Team Uranus, anyways. So.
Wow. Impressive.
Aaron, what's up for our 300th episode?
On the 300th episode of Magic Mics, we will discuss Magic Online version 5 and how everyone just wants version 4 back.
Yeah, I believe that.
Man,
That's so
it was
timely
so
given
good.
today's events, you know.
So good.
Sounds as likely as the other two.
All right, so I want to thank Ruben Bressler. I want to thank Aaron Campbell for joining me for this past hour or so as we go into our final slide. That ends another episode of Magic Mics. Thank you very much for joining us here to discuss all things Magic. I want to thank my co-hosts, you guys, for watching. I hope you follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, and do everything social that tells people that we exist. Catch us online at twitch.tv/magicmics, on Twitter at magicmicscast, and on Facebook at facebook.com/magicmics. Talk to us privately at magicmicspodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at magicmicspodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes, or join us here next week. Same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mics. Good night, everybody.